What's up everyone, and welcome back to the Bold and the Beautiful 24 official channel. Before we begin, please hit the subscribe button today. Let's get started. Leigh Finnegan fakes Loony Luna's death. The Bold and the Beautiful hint Luna Nozawa's days are winding down on the daytime soap opera. All signs are pointing to Luna succumbing to her injuries on the operating table. But is she really dead? Rumor has it someone could fake Luna's death and get her out of the hospital, and you will never guess who. What's coming up next on Bold and Beautiful is as follows: will Luna die? When Leigh Finnegan arrived at the emergency room, she immediately began working on the operating room and began rushing to save Luna, her niece. Leigh has never had much use for her niece, but when Luna Nozawa's life is on the line, the doctor seems to have a change of heart. It was clear that Dr. John Finnegan's mom is going to do whatever it takes to save his daughter. After all, Luna is Leigh's granddaughter too. The Bold and the Beautiful hint that Leigh will begin to see that Luna didn't stand a chance with Poppy Nozawa as her mother, and in a shocking twist, she will make it her mission to protect her granddaughter. A few years ago, Finn was in a similar situation after getting shot. Finn's mom did the unthinkable and kidnapped her son from the hospital and doctored him up at a secret location, nursed him back to health. Leigh Finnegan makes shocking move. According to the Bold and Beautiful rumor mill, Luna's aunt Leigh could decide she wants to protect her from going to prison and remove her from the hospital when no one is looking. In order for Leigh to throw the cops off her trail, she is going to have to fake Luna Nozawa's death and then sneak her out of the hospital when nobody is looking. Maybe Luna's other grandma Sheila Carter could help. She knows a thing or two about faking your own death. Are you surprised by Leigh Finnegan's change of heart? Should Luna Nozawa get another chance? Will Leigh risk her career to save her Finn's daughter? In the shadowy, sterile corridors of University Hospital, a storm was brewing, one of secrets, of maternal reckoning, and of one woman's impossible choice that would alter the lives of the Forrester, Spencer, and Nozawa families forever, because as sirens blared and nurses shouted, "Doctor." Leigh Finnegan stood over the broken, bloodied body of her niece Luna Nozawa and did something no one would have ever imagined. She let go of the icy disdain that had defined her relationship with the girl since birth and began making impossible decisions, not as a doctor, not even as a Finnegan, but as a mother who had learned the brutal cost of inaction once before and wasn't willing to repeat the same mistake again. Because years ago, when her son John Finn Finnegan was shot by the woman who brought him into this world and left to die, Leigh had done the unthinkable, faking his death, stealing his body from the hospital, and nursing him back to life in secret, fueled by a mix of desperation, brilliance, and an unwillingness to bury another child. So now, faced with Luna flatlining on the operating table, her vitals failing, her young face drained of color from internal bleeding and the trauma of the gunshot, it wasn't a medical decision Leigh made, it was a family one, a gut-wrenching, high-stakes gamble to defy the law, the hospital board, and common sense itself, because this wasn't just a patient, this was her blood, her granddaughter, whether she liked it or not, and Leigh had finally realized that Luna never had a chance, not with Poppy Nozawa, the flakiest, most selfish woman Leigh had ever known as her mother, always caught up in some new age nonsense, men, and scandals. While Luna grew up looking for love and guidance in all the wrong places, including in the twisted affections of the Spencer family, where things had recently gone violently, tragically off the rails, culminating in Luna's accidental shooting of Liam Spencer in a moment of chaos and psychological break that she may not even fully remember, but the legal system wouldn't care about her trauma, about the clouded mind of a scared, manipulated girl caught in the vortex of generational dysfunction. And that's when it hit Leigh like a bolt of lightning. No one was going to save Luna. No one was going to fight for her, not Bill Spencer, not the Forresters, not Poppy, so it would have to be her, Dr. Leigh Finnegan, who would once again blur the line between medical protocol and maternal instinct to protect what little family she had left, even if it meant staging a death, forging documents, manipulating her fellow doctors, and spiriting a broken girl out of the hospital under the cloak of nightfall, because if she didn't, Luna would either rot behind bars or be buried 6 feet under. And Leigh wasn't about to let that happen. Not again, not on her watch, and so it began, with a single heartbeat. Barely perceptible on the monitor, a whisper of life that most would have missed, but Leigh didn't, because she'd seen the exact same pattern in Finn's vitals all those years ago when he lay between life and death, and she knew in her soul that Luna still had a chance, but only if no one knew it. So while the other surgeons readied a crash cart and called time of death, Leigh snapped into action with a calm ruthlessness that startled even the most seasoned trauma nurse, declaring that she would personally handle Luna's post-mortem care, invoking her senior authority as chief of surgery to dismiss the room, and once the blinds were drawn and the lights dimmed, she moved quickly, administering a dose of an experimental sedative compound she had tucked away for emergencies, one that would mimic death for several hours, lowering pulse, slowing respiration, cooling the skin all while keeping the patient stable enough to survive extraction, and as she inserted the final 4 and watched Luna's vitals dip below detectable thresholds, Lee whispered, "You don't die today," before pulling the sheet over Luna's face and stepping out of the room to deliver the news that would shatter. The hospital. Luna Nozawa was dead, or so it seemed, and the reactions came fast and ferociously heartbreaking, with Poppy collapsing in the hallway, wailing and inconsolable, blaming herself, begging Lee for answers and forgiveness, not knowing her daughter was alive just feet away, while Finn, stoic and torn, tried to support his mother's decision even as he struggled to reconcile his surgical training with the raw, sudden grief of losing his niece. And then came the press, the police, the media. Storm that demanded to know how the daughter of a former model and the granddaughter of the infamous Sheila Carter could have died after less than an hour on the table, with reporters pushing conspiracy theories and internet sleuths stirring up old scandals like Sheila's fake death, speculating wildly about whether Luna's demise was real, and while all that unfolded outside the walls of the hospital, Lee was already putting her plan into motion inside, slipping Luna's unconscious body into a transport pod typically used for inter-hospital transfers and arranging for a private ambulance to pick her up under the guise of a medical waste removal, then meeting that ambulance at a remote warehouse outside Los Angeles, one she had kept secret ever since Finn's recovery, stocked with medical supplies, oxygen, and a full surgical suite in case things went sideways. And as the ambulance pulled away from the hospital with no sirens, no lights, and no suspicion, Lee couldn't help but glance up at the hospital's roof, half expecting someone to be watching her, but the night was quiet, the stars indifferent, and she knew there was no turning back, because faking a death once might have been a miracle, but doing it twice was an invitation for disaster. And yet, her resolve was unshakable, because Luna deserved better than a courtroom, a prison cell, or a funeral, and once they reached the warehouse, Lee immediately hooked Luna up to oxygen and began monitoring her vitals, watching as her pulse slowly returned to normal, her eyelids fluttered, and color returned to her cheeks, and when Luna finally opened her eyes, dazed and frightened, Lee leaned in and said, "You're safe, but no one can know you're alive." And over the next several days, as the city mourned Luna's death, Lee worked around the clock to stabilize her body, rehydrate her, and explain in bits and pieces the reasons behind her decision, and Luna, at first confused and terrified, soon began to understand that this was her second chance, not just at life, but at identity, and though the guilt of shooting Liam haunted her every waking moment, she knew deep down she hadn't meant to hurt him, that something inside her had snapped that night, something dark and broken from years of emotional neglect and abandonment, and as she slowly regained strength, she began asking the hard questions. What now? How long would she have to stay hidden? What would happen to her mother? And most importantly, could she ever face the world again? But Lee didn't have all the answers, only instincts, and those instincts told her that the less people who knew, the better, although she did begin contemplating the possibility of bringing in one person who had experience in this kind of deception. Sheila Carter, the one woman who had faked more deaths than most had birthdays, and as crazy as it seemed, Lee knew Sheila had a stake in Luna too, genetically at least, and if there was one thing Sheila was good at, besides destruction, it was survival, so she made the call, arranging a secret meeting at the edge of town in a grimy motel where Sheila arrived in a hoodie and sunglasses, shocked to find her granddaughter alive, but equally intrigued at the opportunity to help, and after a long, tense negotiation, Lee and Sheila struck a fragile, dangerous alliance. Sheila would provide the fake IDs, the travel documents, and the hideout in Mexico she once used to disappear from the authorities, and in exchange, Lee would ensure Sheila's name stayed clear of the press frenzy surrounding Luna's death.